I was born in October 1989, but I was not born alone. I had a twin brother who died shortly after birth. And for a long time, throughout my 20s, I was not aware that this was a trauma that I had never worked on, that this was actually a trauma in the first place. And it never occurred to me to reconnect with him, because back then I didn't have the spiritual understanding that I have right now and that I gained about 4 years ago during my spiritual awakening when I was suffering from a severe health issue. And in today's video, I want to share a story with you, a true story of how I reconnected with my twin brother in the spirit realm during a Dr. Joe Dispenza advanced retreat. In fact, during my very first Dr. Joe Dispenza advanced retreat. So throughout my 20s, I was living a very self-destructive life. I was hating myself, I was hating my existence, and I was desperately looking for a piece of me that was missing. I always had the feeling that I could never be alone. I always needed a partner in my life. I always needed somebody around me. I hated to be alone. I was not happy with myself. I always had the feeling something was missing. And then when I experienced my spiritual awakening, through which I was thankfully guided by my spiritual mentor, who's also a family member of mine, she then gave me the idea that, hey, maybe this could be something to focus on. Maybe this could be something to work on with your twin brother. And I was back then still very spiritually ignorant, and I was like, how could that be a trauma? I mean, I've never met him. What's that about? I don't get it. But then, because of her guidance, I immersed myself into books about this topic. I started to write him letters, and while I was going through my trauma healing journey, and then also through me manifesting physical healing, and then also me manifesting more abundance, I then decided to go to the very first Joe Dispenza retreat that I went to. Nowadays, I've already been to 3, and I'm very confident that I will soon go to number 4. So here's what happened. It all started with me being really pissed. Oh, I was angry when I arrived at the Joe Dispenza retreat. I know it sounds a little bit crazy, but it's the truth, because I was flying late in the evening from Germany to Turkey. I was completely tired already because I was excited before my flight because of this event, and then my flight was 2 to 3 hours late, and then I arrived in the middle of the night. I think I arrived at about 2 a.m. at the hotel. Then the next day I was tired again, and I was then going into this ego mode of like, oh God, why is this happening? And oh, I've spent all this money on it. This is such a waste. Why did I do this? And I was basically just having a temper tantrum. And that, when it then, in one of the first meditations, hit me. It hit me in a way that it is hard for me to put it into words, but I was just starting to cry. I was crying, and for some reason, I was always over and over again saying, I am sorry, I am sorry, I am sorry, while I was then at some point even lying on the floor. And when I opened my eyes again, I still remember that the woman next to me was looking at me and saying, whoa, what was going on there? And I was like, well, I don't know. I was completely confused, but my twin brother hadn't said hello yet. It took another walking meditation where I felt so much love for life, so much gratitude to be alive, so much love for existence, and I was just reaching this frequency of love over and over and over again, and I was so incredibly happy. And nope, he also didn't show up there. But then it happened. In one of the next meditations, when I expected it the least, because always remember, the mystical might hit you exactly when you expect it the least. And Joe Dispenza often makes fun of that when he says people want to experience a mystical experience, and then when the mystical experience comes, they go, oh my God, what is happening? Oh my God. And then they don't want the mystical experience anymore. So that's actually my advice for you if you ever want to experience a mystical experience, or if it just hits you. Just go with the flow, relax into it. And I still remember how in this meditation, suddenly I had this feeling of immense love, and a love that was so intense that it was hard for me to understand it. It was hard for me to even feel it. It was, especially now that I'm talking to you about this and that I share this very personal story with you, it was hard for me to feel it, to understand it, to put it into words, but I was just surrounded by love. And then at the laying down part of the meditation, when we were all laying down in the end, when we were going to that relaxed space, that's when it then happened. My twin brother came down to me. I think the best way for me to describe it is with the words, he came down to me. Like he really came down from the spirit realm and he showed himself to me. And I was at this point already in tears. I was feeling this love, this overwhelming love. And the closer he got, the more love I could feel in my heart. It was this incredible feeling of unconditional love. And what happened next truly surprised me because, okay, let me rephrase that. Back then it actually shocked me. It also in the beginning, excuse me for my language, but it scared the living beep out of me. Because he came down to me and I saw him the way he would look like if he had not died, if he was the same age as me right now. And we were non-identical twins, so he looked a little bit different than me, but it was just so incredibly intense to see in this moment the way he looked with this combination of the facial features of my mom and my dad. It was just so overwhelming in this moment. It was completely overwhelming. And then he started a conversation with me, which in the beginning scared me, but I remembered what Joe Dispenza always said, relax into it, just relax into the experience. Because of course I had never made such an experience before with nobody, with no spirit guide or spirit entity. And then there was my twin brother. It was like, whoa, what is going on here? And this is something where I can confidently say, again, I want to mention it, relax into it. Don't be afraid of it. These mystical experiences, they can lead you to a certain level of growth that you can't even imagine. And then he started the conversation with me and he actually said to me, I will never forget that, finally you reached a frequency. Finally you reached a frequency of love that allowed you, that truly allowed you to, and now I'm getting a little bit emotional here, so please forgive me, but that truly allowed you to connect with me, that allowed you to see me, that allowed you to go into this energy. And we were then having this conversation, this incredibly emotional conversation where in the beginning, I talked to him in a way where I also let out my negative emotions, my resentment. I said like, why did you leave me alone? Why did you have to leave me alone? Why did you have to go away and leave me in this world that I never wanted to be in, that I never wanted to live in, that I always hated? I mean, of course, in this time when I experienced the Joe Dispenza event, I was already at a point where I didn't hate myself anymore, where I already found love for life. Otherwise, I would have most likely not been able to establish this connection, to experience this connection. But he was then telling me that it was all planned and that it all made sense, that it had to come like that because, and yeah, now I'm getting emotional again. I'm always getting emotional while I'm talking about this story and while I share it. So that's the first time that I actually share it on camera. So he was telling me that, and this is something that I already knew from my parents, that he would have been severely disabled, and my parents already knew that. They still decided to not end the pregnancy, and nowadays I'm very thankful for that. And he then explained to me that there would have not been enough resources for me to survive because I would do some stupid stuff. That's how he said it. And in the beginning I didn't really know what he meant with resources because my parents had enough for food, for shelter. There was never any lack there. But what he meant was that my parents would have been so busy and so occupied with him that I would have not experienced the love that I needed to not, well, how can I put it, end myself, to not end this life. And this is something that he then explained to me. And I then had this flashback to years before when my spiritual mentor, my family member, told me that the reason why I was born with a congenital heart defect, I had heart surgeries as a baby and when I was 13 years old, The reason why I was born with this heart defect was because in this life I have the purpose, the challenge, however you want to call it, to listen to my heart, to connect with my heart, to help others to do the same. And back then, when my spiritual mentor told me that, I was not spiritual at all. I was still completely in self-destruction. But in this moment, I had this flashback, and he then said to me, yes, that's exactly it. The love. Because of my congenital heart defect and because I was born prematurely, which also comes on top of that again, I was in the beginning in an incubator as a baby. And of course, my parents were then barely allowed to touch me. And this touch is incredibly important for a small baby. And he then explained to me that if they would have had to focus all their attention on him, I would have not been able to live my purpose, which is now so crazy now that I'm recording this video for you, now that I help hundreds and thousands of people to activate their heart, to go into brain and heart coherence, to manifest their dreams, to heal trauma, which again, back when my spiritual mentor mentioned that for the first time, I never thought that this would actually be my journey. And in the first moment, I felt guilty. I was like, oh, so just because of me, you had to go. And he then explained to me, no, there's no guilt. There are no negative emotions. It was all planned. That's the way it had to be, and it is okay. And he then shared with me that I will learn so much more. I will help so many people, inspire so many people, and that it's all okay. And that was an experience that healed me in a way that I can't really put into words, even though right now I tried my best to put it into words, but it just healed me. It healed me from so much unknowingness, so much uncertainty, so much pain. It showed me how my past made sense, how my future made sense. It was just an incredible experience, and that happened to me on my very first Joe Dispenza Advanced Retreat. And if you now want to find out more about all the other things that I've experienced and learned at the Joe Dispenza Advanced Retreats and how Dr. Joe Dispenza brainwashed me in the most amazing way you can possibly imagine, you can click on this video to find out more about it. And of course, I invite you to subscribe, and that if you want to work with me either in an individual coaching session or in my 8-week coaching program, you can click on the second or the first link in the description.